Brexit, food safety challenge or opportunity? I'm Mike Stones for Food Manufacture at the Safety Conference. To answer that question, I asked Sue Davies, Chief Policy Advisor with Which. Here's what Sue told me.
I think it's going to depend very much on the model that we go for. I think there are both potential risks and opportunities. I think if you're thinking about opportunities, it's a chance to really rethink what type of food and farming policy we want. We obviously have the Common Agricultural Policy at the moment. We've never really had a joined-up food policy, with a lot of the challenges that are facing the food system, whether that is about food safety, but also wider issues around sustainability, obesity. We need to be really thinking in a much more joined-up way. So it's important that we do take that opportunity. I think on the regulatory side, we have a whole load of consumer protection legislation that generally serves consumers very well. A lot of that has built up over the last few years in the aftermath of BSE and other food scares, and we'd be very concerned if that was dismantled.
And what do you think the priorities for consumers should be?
Well, if you're looking at EU legislation, at the moment we have the General Food Law Regulation, for example, which sets out some really important principles. So it makes it very clear that the aim should be for a high level of human health protection. It sets out key issues like traceability, responsibilities on businesses while recognising the role of official controls. But also it sets out how we should be doing risk analysis, the scientific advice, keeping that independent, the risk management, and making sure that we're dealing effectively with uncertainty when it exists. So we think that that sort of approach is important to maintain. Thinking more broadly about the implications of Brexit, I think that we have to think about if it will, again, very dependent on what model and our relationship with the EU, but it raises issues around scientific risk assessment capacity, about research capacity, and also about enforcement of controls as well. So making sure that we've got adequate consumer protection in place, but also particularly with the system under strain already at the moment, how we make sure that we're still maintaining a decent level of control so that consumers can have confidence.
So what sort of job has EU legislation done over the years?
Well, the EU has brought in a broad range of legislation covering everything from our health claims on foods through to hygiene rules, and setting out the overarching framework for how we approach legislation. And I think that has built up, and generally it's a mixture of sort of principles-based regulation with some prescription when we need it. So it's looking at that legislation, making sure that we keep the important parts for consumer protection, but also take any opportunities to actually think about whether it could be done better. So there are some obvious gaps. I don't think so much in relation to the food safety side, although there's issues about whether the traceability rules we have at the moment go far enough, but issues like labelling, traffic light labelling, origin labelling, it could be an opportunity to look at some of those kinds of issues. But our key concern is that we have to be looking at this very much from a consumer perspective. We have to make sure that consumer interests are at the heart of the negotiations, and that we don't lose some of the important protection that we've got at the moment.
From a consumer perspective, what would you like to see come out of the current review of the Food Crime Unit?
Well, I think the system of enforcement is absolutely crucial. The FSA is doing several important things at the moment. It's got its Regulating Our Future review, which is looking at the whole system of enforcement. It's looking at the Food Crime Unit, and it's also looking at the system of recall. So we think that those are all really important to be reviewing, and we need a much more sustainable system. We see the FSA as playing a really important role within that, both in terms of dealing with more complex cases in general, but we think that the Food Crime Unit needs to be in the FSA, and it now needs to move from this initial phase where it's been more in kind of intelligence gathering role and move much more into investigatory capacity, really dealing with the complexities of the supply chain that we're facing now.
Sue Davies, Chief Policy Advisor with Which, thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is Mike Stones for Food Manufacture at the Food Safety Conference.